let me start with some words about the Hackett Group. And the only reason why I want to do this is because it has to do something with information that I'm going to be showing you. So at Hackett, some of you are familiar with us. But actually what we do, we are an advisory organization. We started some years ago with actually benchmarking and defining what world-class procurement is. So we have a methodology in how to identify world-class performers. And from that, we have obviously started to do other type of things, such as the traditional consulting and also the type of advisory coaching support. Interesting about Hackett, and this relates to some of the information that I'm going to be sharing with you, is what you see in the right-hand side, which is the value grid. This is the methodology in how we define and identify world-class performers, or top quartile performers. And basically what we do is we assess organizations in two dimensions, in effectiveness and in efficiency, to identify what is the level of performance they are delivering. So based on real performance and not what they have done to get it, really in outcomes, we identified a world-class organization, which are, in this example, the ones in the blue box. So those organizations that manage to get both areas right in terms of performance, we identified, we named them world-class. Within the procurement function, we do this in our company as well for finance and for HR, for IT. But then after we identify those, we start to look at what are they doing, what are the capabilities that they have in place, and try to understand what of those things are common to all companies and not something that is going to work very well at one particular organization. So what you're going to be looking at from in some of the slides is coming from that data and from that analysis that we have done in world-class organizations. And let me start with some of the characteristics. And you will see that in purpose, I don't have the values for some of those graphs. And the reason is that we could spend probably 1 hour, 2 hours in each of these performance indicators. And actually, that's not really the point of today. The point of today is to understand the differences between the top performers, the world-class organizations, and the rest, and what this is telling us, and what type of pressure is putting in procurement organizations to do, to react in different ways. So what you're looking at is the procurement cost as a % of spend. So this is the operating cost of the function. The great majority of that is clearly labor, but if you are doing some outsourcing, if you have technology, other type of additional costs. As a % of the total spend, and when we talk at Hackett, the majority of the times, if we don't say it, we talk about the total, what many companies refer as to addressable spend. So not necessarily what you have control as such, and rather all what it could be addressed in a company. So if you look at this metric, if you are world-class, which is the green bar, you see, and the blue bar is the median of the rest of the organizations, cross-industry set of companies in here. If you see there is a 17% difference between being a world-class organizations and the rest. And for both groups, the blue one and the green one, this is the median. There are better performance and worse performance in each of the groups. But I think that the most important point is that world-class organizations, it's a great advantage. If you are a world-class organization, they operate quite lean compared to the blue ones. Now, if you see our forecast, which is this part of the graph, it's starting to get difficult, in particular for advanced organizations, to reduce the operating cost of the function. So they need to find other ways of doing this. If you are non-world-class, the blue bar is typically easier. There are some other options that you can still go for it. Obviously, this is might be different for specific organizations, but in general, that's a clear trend that we see. Now, let me take you to another metric, which is the return on investment. So we look at the operating cost, the procurement function. What is the cost associated with that? And this is a metric that typically the finance team really likes to see. Our CFOs really, this is one of the metrics that they are interested on. And we know that the benefits that the procurement function can go beyond exclusively the savings. But having said that, let's look at this one, which is to a certain extent easy to calculate. And it's a ratio between the cost of the function, the previous slide that I showed you, and the savings that are achieved. Again, cross-industry, we could spend hours in the definitions of these ones, of the different components. It is pretty much the ratio between the cost of the function, which you saw in the previous slide, and the total savings that were achieved. Total savings include reduction and avoidance, all of them price-based. Also the avoidance piece, price-based, is not other operating benefits from, I don't know, improving quality or working capital type of things. It's all price-based, but still avoidance and not only cost reduction. So again, if you're a world class, you have a great return on investment compared to the rest. Now what you can see clearly is that they are struggling, and there are some peaks because what happened in the previous recession nowadays it's difficult to know. We are going out of one, we are getting into a new one. But all what happened in 2008, 9, etc., had an impact, in particular in the savings, also in the cost of the function, and therefore you see those peaks for both groups. Having said that, we see that in particular for world-class organizations, they are struggling to continue getting the same savings, the level of savings that they had as in the previous years. So we see savings going down. This year actually went up a little bit, stopping the clear trend for world-class organizations where savings were going down. So, and there are many reasons for that, but I think something that is clear and we all know in this practice is that it's very difficult year on year get the same savings and just keep going. Once you have gone and really professionalized your activities in a particular spend categories, it's very difficult, year on year keep going and achieve the same results. Now, the expectations from the business probably are even higher if you have been performing that well. And then when you have the meeting with the CFO, you're saying, okay, and how much is going to be this year? Well, it probably is going to be a very tough call because you have been doing already some important things to get to those levels. Now, if you are in the blue graph, part of the blue group, the non-work class, there is still a way to go. So there are still some areas that you can work on, but we also hear companies and procurement functions saying we are not top performers, we are also not getting there, but it's getting more and more difficult to get those savings. So there is really a concern from all organizations, particularly if you're more mature than others, about, okay, how can we show the value that we are delivering to the business? And so as I said, the question is how we can continue adding value and how can we evolve our value proposition? What is the value that we are delivering? And there are many ways in how organizations are becoming more mature and delivering value to their to the business of their companies. And typically starts with what is core of what we do in procurement, which is supply assurance, getting the right goods and services at the right time and place. Probably it's not sounding very sexy, but it's fundamental of what we are doing, and we still, we cannot say, well, that's something that we are not going to be focusing on. Typically, and again, different organizations are going through different journey, but typically they start the questions about, are we getting this at the right price? And later on, is it the right cost? Now, as organizations mature, the question starts to be, how can we actually go into what we at Hackett call demand management, which is let's look at managing the demand better. Let's try to understand and reduce the variability, the complexity of the demand, so that we can be early enough and delivering some value from those activities. And on the top, we call it value management. You could call it in a different way. It's the more strategic part. It's not really about sourcing a strategy, and it's really about delivering value, business value from the spend that we manage. And this might be very different for organizations. Potentially in the same industry, there might be some commonalities between what one company is trying to achieve than the other one. But this is really very specific to the company and the procurement function that wants to enable business. It might be that it's about mergers and acquisitions, supporting mergers and acquisitions. It might be that it's about innovation, or it might be that actually what the business is trying to achieve in this year and the next 2 years is expansion in new markets. It might be different objectives, and the idea is that the procurement function enables those. On top of that, obviously, it's not one or the other one. It's just adding and evolving the value proposition. Now, I'm not sure if it can be seen in the slides, but actually the last 2 stages, and as you go up this model, more and more you require from the procurement function requires you to engage with the internal stakeholders or your internal customers. So the alignment needs to be there, and you need to be working together with them. Now, how you're going to be managing demand, for example, if you don't get close to the demand, if you are, just get to know what the demand is today, and by the way, we need it for tomorrow. So it's very difficult to that. Aligned to this, obviously, the role of the procurement function is changing over time. While we were in some cases, a very good buyer, and key negotiation skills were required, when you trying to align and start working as a team with the supply chain, and you start trying to influence your internal stakeholders and the demand, obviously the skill requirements and a number of things are changing as well, and the role of the procurement is changing. So we see that procurement functions are trying to align to the internal stakeholders and become something different than just the gatekeeper or the bring me this type of organization. I want this, give it to me to the good price. So, with all this development that we see companies are doing in order to evolve their value proposition, we see that very concrete activities, concrete focus they have in terms of the priorities, the objectives, and clearly the projects that they start. And this graph is looking at the top 5 key objectives that we gather from executives. Actually, some of the companies seated around in this group participated and contributed to answering this. So at the executive level, we were asking, what are the key objectives? We asked many different things in an annual survey that we conduct. But we asked, what are the top 5? And you see critical and major objectives for 2016, and clearly beyond. These are some of the things that you cannot change in 1 year. You see the type of things that are included. Reduce and avoid purchase cost, the number 1. But if you go down, elevate the role of procurement to a trusted advisor. Now that's clearly the reflection of that need of getting closer, be able to influence. Increase spend influence, improve agility in stakeholder satisfaction. And obviously the list is longer. This is a global view of the responses. If you look at, for example, European organizations, look at the group for procurement functions in companies headquartered in Europe, there is a slightly difference between this. This is the global view. Innovation, for example, is coming much higher. I think here's the number 6. But it's clear, irrespective of top performer or not, those are the things that organizations say, and they are important for us. We need to get there. This year, the trusted advisor is the number 2. Reduced cost is number 1. We see this. We run this study not only for procurement, we run it for finance, HR, and IT. We see a common trends and being focused on cost for obvious reasons, considering the market trends. But last year was the becoming a trusted advisor, the number 1. And the year before, we had, I think, increased spend influence. So actually, there are some changes over time about what the priorities are. And this has to do, and clearly you have seen it in your own organizations, this has to do with the current situation of your organization, the current priorities. And in some cases you need to react very tactically. Some others you have a little bit more, room for doing more strategic. So this is like, but the top themes, if you will, remain there. Now we also made an analysis in terms of, if you have the big list and each of these bubbles reflects, the top list of objectives, how well the procurement functions are placed to address those and, be able to deliver based on the objectives that they have. So we made an analysis and say, okay, how are they well equipped to address those issues or not? How important are those issues? And we made the analysis and we look at the ones in red are unfortunately some that either are very important or procurement functions are struggling a little bit to address. You see, elevate the role of procurement to a trusted advisor, increase spend influence, and obviously we would need to define more detail what influence is, but also important, supplier innovation, improve agility. There are some of the things that organizations are saying they are important for us and probably they are not the best position in order to address them. And let me pick on the trusted business advisor, which is really the topic of today's session. So what really means to be a trusted business advisor? We talk about alignment to internal stakeholders in order to add value. What exactly is what we are talking about? What is exactly what we should be trying to do in order to get there, if that's what we want to do? And I have only a couple of examples. We have been long time saying, in the procurement practice, 20 years, we need to get executive presence, be at the table. We are adding a little bit more from the analysis that we make from our data. Yes, and by the way, if you are doing this during the planning and budgeting process, is great because then you can be closer to your internal stakeholder, your internal customer, and be potentially a good enabler for them in order to achieve their business objectives. So just being there nowadays is not enough. We also need to be at the right time with that. Also, the second point is quite important, is enabling business execution. More and more we see that there are changes in the market and that organizations need to react fast to the decisions, and nobody can foresee the future. But we in the procurement function are supposed to understand what is happening outside in the supply market, and we gather a lot of information that we could use in order to enable probably a better decision making or a business execution that can help them with their particular objectives. So when we were talking in a session that we ran some time ago around what is a trusted business advisor, this came up, and we believe that is absolutely correct. Now the third point is about how we are perceived by the internal customers or internal stakeholders. And it's clearly that it is important to be perceived as somebody that really wants to help them to achieve their business objectives. This is sometimes not really the case. And we cannot do it with every single individual around the company, but key internal stakeholders, they should be able to see that procurement is really trying to get there. Understanding on the customer, business, and organization is clear. How many times in the past, we were pushed in a corner saying, you don't know, we don't give you that spend because you don't know what you are talking about. It might be engineering, it might be marketing, it might be talent management, for example, or talent. It might be different type of things. So we need to be able to be there and tailor our messages and approaches, because not everybody, this comes back to speaking category management language instead of speaking the language of the business, right? Who cares about category management? Well, we care, but certainly the business not. So it's making that link. having the right set of skills, that's what I was talking, and the language is important, but there are a number of skills that are required for that, for building and maintaining those relationships which are different than what a typical good negotiator would be able to do. So we potentially need other type of people, and there are more, clearly, that might play an important role in really becoming a trusted business advisor. So, what can we do for procurement functions? How we're going to go about this? I don't know if you are at the end of your, we're at the beginning of the calendar year, but I don't know how you are in the process of your particular year in your organizations. But typically, procurement functions start to say, well, we need to see what we're going to do, how we're going to be focused on, and we see in the outside world, a lot of things that are happening. We have a lot of volatility in some of the markets. Some of them actually are playing good for us, some others not, depending on the industry you are in. We see a lot of disruptive innovation, new players coming in that we never saw, that we never thought that we were going to have, but also innovation in terms of the processes and the technology and how we go about it. And then a lot of competition. We ran a study around risk management, I think a year ago more or less, and we were looking at what are the risks that organizations see, and in competition, it was clearly one quite high for all companies. So what can we do if we see these changes happening in the outside? Well, it obviously requires changes in the inside. We cannot just try to keep going the same way we go. And this is not exclusively for procurement. These are for all companies that they see what are the changes, and they need to address some of those issues internally to be able to take advantage of some of them. Now let me look at the changes internally. And this is broader than the topic of business alignment, but the customer-centric piece and becoming a trusted business partner is part of the equation. So it's not coming alone. There are many other things that need to happen. So very briefly, adaptive organizations are those organizations that can be flexible and then can adapt rapidly to the changes. And this is also something that we need to be doing. We call it adaptive organizations because we make some analysis of which organizations are very good in those three dimensions. The other one is around information navigators. With all this volatility, with all those changes, it's important to understand what is happening outside and use that information to make the right decisions. So there are companies and organizations that are very good at that. And another important component in terms of the changes that need to happen internally is the responsive customer-centric piece, which actually has to do with our topic of today, about putting our internal customers at the center of what we are doing, and execute in more responsive, customer-centric way, obviously as well more agile, because the entire companies require more agility, require us to be there when it's needed, and be able to change faster as well. So if the business is in need of doing those type of things, we also need to move in that direction. So let me take the topic of customer-centric. And I don't know what really customer-centric means for you. Probably we would ask, there are many different comments are going to come. Probably, we can do that exercise. I'm just putting some of the key ideas that we have gathered from other organizations, and also things that we see that are critical from the data and the analysis that we make. Responsiveness, client-facing skills, what I was discussing before. I think very important, the number 3, aligning the scorecards and the metrics and the way you assess your performance, align those to what the objectives of the business. So how the business is measuring success, well, make sure that you are measuring your success in those terms, rather than what procurement believes that is the right way to do. Streamline the buying experience. There's a lot of work in this area, from putting technology for building the right governance in the procurement function. There are many different things, definitely an important point. And the last one, balancing the organization to best support stakeholders. Are we organized? Do we have the right governance in place to be able to support our internal stakeholders, yes or no? Do we need to make changes, yes or no? And rather than saying, well, we know how the supply market is working, we understand how our suppliers are organized, and therefore we decide to go for a very supplier-centric model, if you will, that enables us to take the best advantage of the supply market, which is not a bad thing, and we have been doing that for a long time. Now, it might require that we also consider the internal customer side of the question, and saying, well, we also need to get to internal stakeholders. So how can we balance this and still be able to do this effectively, but also efficiently? The traditional you need to do more with less is still there. We just cannot ignore it. So what advanced organizations are doing? And I think I didn't use a lot the typical Hackett data-driven slides, but I thought that these ones are really important, so I really wanted to show this. So we wanted to look at what are some of those characteristics that are helping organizations to get there. And also looking in terms of the value, we wanted to understand whether there is a relationship between making that alignment, spending some time, because as I said, all these activities that we have been talking about require some effort in getting there, and some of the measures of success. And we decided to pick this one, which are the cost savings, because it's someone that I think relates to everybody. And what we did is we wanted to understand whether there is a link between the savings achieved and the time that organizations are spending with this alignment and making changes probably and considering how this is going to impact their own organization and governance. If you see in the left-hand side, we see that organizations that are spending more time in doing this, and when we're talking about more time, it's also at the FTE level, they get 28% higher savings. If you ask me, this is the only reason, we know that's not true. But there is a statistical correlation between those things. And there are some reasons why. If you see in the right-hand side, the extent that procurement performance measures are aligned to the key measures of the business again. So is it a link between I'm measuring my internal procurement, very important KPIs, or I'm actually understanding what is the link and I'm measuring my success based on what they want us to do, the way that they see their own success. Then we see 45%. So there is a link between those. So companies probably on a very intuitive basis know this and they are going for that, but we just want, we have a lot of data. We wanted to understand whether there was something clear on that. We also look at the type, same type of exercise with the role of the procurement function. When we run some benchmarks, we also look at what the internal stakeholders are saying. What is the perception of the internal stakeholders? Not only the specific, savings, full-time equivalence, cost, etc. of the procurement function, but we also ask the internal stakeholders, okay, how do you see, how you perceive, what is the role of the procurement function? So we have a lot of data on that, and then we just selected what are the savings achieved by organizations that their internal stakeholders, not their own procurement function, say, well, they are a gatekeeper, or actually they are a value business partner. Again, very important difference. Almost 70% of difference in terms of the savings reported. And as I said, there are many reasons for why. If the business are seeing us as a partner that help them to deliver their business objectives, why they are not going to give us more and more and give us visibility to what they are doing? They're going to be asking us for how to go about that, how we can enable them to achieve their objectives. So what can procurement do to, to overcome some of the challenges that we have in making that change and becoming, improving the role, not necessarily improving, evolving the role that we play in the procurement function. And all of these, if you see, they are not rocket science. I think it's a pretty straightforward to have helped the procurement function to improve the customer experience for the internal stakeholders. What is important is to have a structured approach for that. It's not making it sometimes for some internal stakeholders in some times of the year because now it's important, or because we had a lot of problems with some of them, or because we want to get more spend influence in some particular areas, and rather have a structured approach for doing this. And if you see, the most important are not actually what is in the bubbles as such. The bubbles are quite straightforward. It's about how you execute what is in each of those bubbles. So identify your customers, measure the success, analyze the results, and take action. Very simple. Now, how to do some of those and how to execute well on a structure, with a structured approach, is what is playing an important role. So let me go through some of these and some of the nuances of how to execute well some of those things. And I'm in the first one about who is your internal stakeholders, who is your internal customer. And at Hackett we are starting to use this name customer, which some organizations really don't like, and say we are part of the same family, we are partnering with the business, we help to deliver. A little bit in purpose we are using customer just to drive this service mindset of delivering, and your customer, your supplier doesn't need to be somebody that you don't like and that you don't actually use in order to deliver value, so that there is no issue with that. But we have who is really your internal customer, and in procurement we might have to do with every single individual in the company because of the nature of the work that we do. But obviously not all of them are our key internal stakeholders or key customers. So as good we are in segmenting our suppliers, we have done this for a number of years. It's not only the ABC based on spend, and we also look at the risk, and we also look at the type of relationship that we might have. There's a number of criteria. Hopefully we are very sophisticated already in doing this. What about the customers? Typically this is done more in the sales area, so the more advanced models, and this is a very simplistic way of seeing it, but there might be very, very sophisticated models in order to understand and segment your customers. But it's important because, as we know, we don't want to follow the same approach for every single customer. It's not the same. The CFO is not the same. The COO, the head of engineering or marketing, that the assistant who wants to, get some flowers for somebody. So all of them, our internal stakeholders and customers, but we need to be able to differentiate and accordingly address what are the concerns and how we're going to be engaging with them. And we just need to forget, minimal effort is also something that we need to consider and put to work all those great systems that we are implementing. But there are some others that with a great system is not going to work. We need to do more than that. So I think it's important to have that differentiation. Once you know who they are, understanding what is the experience, the customer experience is also quite important. And I just added a list of examples, areas that we consider worth for procurement organizations to explore. I'm not going to go through all of them, but clearly channel management, we already talked a little bit about that. What is the right way to get access to those internal customers? But let me add something in demand management and customer support. And demand management in this case is not the goods and services, the demand for goods and services that we need to enable in the company. And it's rather the demand for your services. It might be that your service as a procurement function is helping with the PO process. It might be that part of your services is to manage suppliers, to take, do the help supporting contract management. those are the type of services the procurement function offers and provides to the rest of the business, to the internal stakeholders. Now, we realize, talking to many companies, that the procurement functions don't really know exactly what is the demand for those services. They tend to be quite reactive for that demand. Now we're going to go and expand in, for example, other markets. Well, we need your support on that. And they know it today, but probably before they were not planning for that. So that type of services that they provide is different than the other services that they might have. Or we really need to help you, our sales organization, go and do this. Or there are some issues with risk management. Or we need you to do this. So understanding what is the demand of the services that you are offering is important. And what is the customer support, which I think is the next area. What is the way that you can support your internal customers for those services that you are providing? And let me pick the last one in terms of brand management. And if sometimes for procurement functions sounds difficult we need to brand or rebrand ourselves. These type of topics and this type of concept seems to be for more the sales organization, not really procurement. And having said that, I think everybody knows, if we like it or not, that there are some perceptions. And if you talk you go to your companies, what would they say? The different, obviously different internal stakeholders would have a different opinion, but what they would say about the procurement function. What is the brand that you have created? It might be, let's pick a mobile, a car, an airline, whatever type of or a yogurt. There are some of them that immediately people associate with different concepts. It might be reliability, it might be quality, it might be innovation, it might be different things. So even if we like it or not, unfortunately or fortunately, there is a brand of procurement within every company. And what we have seen is that procurement functions are being more careful of understanding what is the current brand and architecting and rebranding them in order to make sure that is, first of all, is what they like to be or what the business needs procurement to be, and that they're consistently doing this through a number of very, very logical steps. The communication, delivering, very important. We need to be able to deliver on that. So brand management is something that we see a lot. Sounds like a high-level topic, but it's clearly important for the procurement function. Because as I said, everybody has something in their minds, and having a good brand may enable the function to do many different things in the benefit of the function, but clearly of the business. It's very important to listen to what they are saying, and most probably all of you have, or many of you have, a survey that is conducted, annual surveys that might be together with the rest of the, as a company level with other functions, in understanding what is the different perceptions. There are many specific best practices, if you will, in order how to do this well. The type of questions that you should ask, clearly not asking, are you happy or not? With those type of questions, unfortunately, you cannot do much with the data that you get after that. It's important the segmentation that you have for your internal stakeholders to be able to understand how you are going to assess that data afterwards. So it's not only listen to it, but it might be about, based on the type of stakeholder, understand what they are saying to you. Engage, relationship managers, customer forums. There are many ways in how to do this. For some companies work, some of them very well, for others not. You also need to have a feel of the type of culture that you have in your organization and where you are coming from in order to start implementing some of those things. And hopefully you have a communications department, and that might be able to support in terms of what works well and what hasn't, so that you can start there. I'm happy to share some examples if you are interested. And share the information with the internal stakeholders, what are the type of things that you have been doing. Also, what their feedback is. In many cases, if an organization asks for feedback, received the feedback, and nobody heard anything in more than a month, it's even worse that you ask in the first place. Better don't ask if you're not going to go back and say, well, this is the feedback, and this is the action plan that we are taking. And we know that feedback is about perceptions. So we need to understand how we're going to be handling this. But it's important to share. It's important also to look at your scorecards and see what we were saying in terms of how you're measuring success, where you are putting focus based on the feedback that you are hearing from your internal stakeholders. So again, none of them is rocket science. It's about how you execute and how you go about running some of these. In some industries, they are much better in doing this. But really, that doesn't mean that we cannot do it. You know, I had an experience with an organization in the Nordics, and they're actually very good procurement function. And they invited me to support them in their 3-year planning session and project. They started the project. And we conducted a number of interviews for them with key internal stakeholders. They run some others. And we collected a lot of data and we put it together. And then we did a workshop. And it was very interesting because I ran some of those interviews on my own. And we also collected some feedback in an online survey. And it was interesting to see that a recurrent topic, together with others, it was communication. More or less it was, we like you, you need to improve this and this, not many things. And communication is important. So we ran the workshop, I was facilitating the workshop. And then obviously communication, it was almost nowhere in the list of things that they were going to do for the next 3 years. And I said to the CPO, sorry to bother here the priority setting, but what about communication? And then they say, well, yes, but actually we are not good at that. So if they see that we are delivering great value, they are going to get it. And I said, sorry, not. They are really telling you that you need to communicate much better. And not because you are not good enough, you should not start doing something in this. Because probably all the good things that you are doing, some of them are going to know, but some of them not. And then, it's an issue there. So, and I'm sure that there are many more companies. In that case, I was just happened to be there to see it. So over time, clearly, it's important to build a more holistic approach and look at some other areas than just, listening to the stakeholders and, understanding what the value is in their minds. It's important to get, as I said, a structure and potentially a more holistic approach. For example, something around strategy, governance, and communication. Understand what the key customers or internal stakeholders are, what are the needs, and making sure that you have a process to translate this in kind of a roadmap for the procurement strategy. Similar to what I was describing with this Danish company. It is part of the strategy. If you hear what they are saying, put it in considering seriously in the strategy that you are going to make. Governance, making sure that you have the mechanisms in place in your governance for addressing those issues and to coordinate, between internal stakeholders and the procurement function. Nowadays, we see more and more the creation of shared service centers, centers of excellence. Half of them are offshore. Organizations might, for example, have some outsourcing providers also supporting them. So there are many things that are happening, and the operating model for the procurement is getting even more complex than the typical metrics that we used to have, which was complex enough. But more and more we see that this, it's getting more complex. So understanding what are those mechanisms and making sure that they are there to help you with that alignment is important. This is something that you might not, do just for the next 6 months and that's it. And this requires to really consider how you consider your operating model, what you're going to do from a governance standpoint, and communication, which I already talked about that. And there is another kind of chunk of activities or approach that you might consider relationship management. It's important about building and developing and then maintaining those relationships. Service design, very important, understanding what is the services that you are going to provide and building the services that you are providing, architecting them, considering that is not, this is what we do in procurement. No, this is what the customers, the type of services, if you will, that the customers require from us. So let's consider this when we are designing how we're going to go about that. Channel management, we already talked about that. Different customer stakeholders, different channels that you might need to use. And let me go through the last one, which we haven't talked a lot about that. Training and education. If you remember that pyramid where we were saying the procurement function is changing the role. And obviously it's not that we are not doing supply assurance and we are not doing price, we are doing all that, and we are doing more. Now, not everybody in the procurement function is doing all those different activities. And so in many cases in the procurement function, depending actually on the industry, they might have people in procurement for many, many years. And others is a more active function, changing, different and refreshing the skills and the talent that they have. So training and education is important. What type of skills that are needed are very different when you are moving from when you are playing one role to the next one. Identify which ones are important, which ones you don't have. Very important, what are those skills for the future, not for today, but probably next year that are going to be very important for us. And making sure that you have a good program that enables those individuals to be able to play the role that they are required. Unfortunately, the great negotiators are good, but probably they are not the best necessarily for conflict handling, not necessarily. Some of them might be very good. But for example, cultural awareness might be a challenge for them to just go into the next role and deliver as we need them probably to deliver. Knowledge management, very important. Build repositories of knowledge. If we build everything in single individuals, when they go and one day they are going to go for whatever reason, we struggle with the knowledge that we have been building. So clearly knowledge, but also the entire culture helps organizations. And in the management of talent, so we were saying the entire cycle of that is not only having the right people trained with the right skills. Probably you need different type of individuals for some of those roles. So you need to acquire them. Some of them are going to be very expensive in the market because everybody wants those type of skills. So looking forward is important, having that mindset of what is going to come in probably 1 year, in 2 years from now, which requires you to make a plan, and therefore it's important the link to the strategy that you have, which is not absolutely in the next 6 months, very short term. Closing thoughts and recommendations. So we can keep talking. I'm not sure whether I can keep talking longer, but we could, in principle, because there are many things to talk about around this. But I just decided to pick only 3. People, procurement executives ask me, how do we know when we are getting there? How do we know what are the type of things that we should be putting in place? There are many. I just picked 3 of the things which are not necessarily easy to implement, but I think they're understandable for everybody and really can make a difference. And number 1, an explicit customer management role is defined. And finance has all these business partnering that probably you have heard in your own organizations. It's something similar to that in the sense of we need to be able to partner with the rest of the business and having a role that is going to be doing those activities. Now, this, not necessarily you need to have one FTE doing this. In some cases, the category manager could play that role, depending on the spend category, depending on the organization, your operating model, depending on the business, etc. In some cases, not. But having that role defined enables organization to at least get internal focus on, for the procurement function, we are serious about this, and we are people that are looking into how to manage those relationships. And also for the business, that they see, okay, we already heard, the business partner, from finance, we understand procurement is trying to get closer to us as well. So it is important. As I said, it's not necessarily a new FTE that you need to have in there. And this is coming from the supplier market. So we organize our own category management because it's looking into the external market. And this is having a role for looking more into the internal stakeholders, internal customers, how they are organized, that they can help with that translation. Second point, push-based corporate sourcing teams become pull-based supply teams. You see the words that we pick at in purpose. It is more about not pushing these contracts, pushing these suppliers, pushing this system, by the way, this policy, and which at the end of the day is important that we do this for the company. Now, we can do the same, a little bit different, and start talking to people and working in teams. So we are a supply team. We are not the procurement guys that are pushing just, their policies and procedures. And we are become more pool-based. So they are coming to us and asking us, rather than, by the way, this is the supplier, this is the contract, take it or leave it. We have enough to do to a certain extent. And the last point, the procurement organization proactively engage customers and views customer satisfaction as a critical objective. Now, we review a number of scorecards, part of what we do, and because our heritage in benchmarking, when people come and mainly the top 10 KPIs, which actually doesn't, there are no top 10 KPIs. If you are really serious about improving your performance, well, this is linked to where you are, where you would like to be, and those are the KPIs that you're going to pick. But irrespective of that, we see the internal stakeholder satisfaction somewhere being an index in the best cases that not necessarily people are concerned about. So if we got our savings, then the internal stakeholders are saying, but it was exactly the same 2 years ago. So, no, but we are delivering great value because we have the savings. So it's a little bit of that mentality. I think everybody has it already somewhere in the scorecard, but not at the level of being customer-centric and saying, if we get a good results, this is important for us. We are really delivering value to the organization. And we know that there are different perceptions in terms of what value means. But it's part of our job. Unfortunately, our job is not only go outside and get what the internal business wants. It's also about understanding a number of things and also defining what's value, because there are going to be many different perceptions around that.